Ma'am? General Sutton? The room fell dead silent. Every breath seemed to freeze in place. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations halted like someone had pulled the plug on the world. Even the military band rehearsing just outside the conference hall missed a beat. He was tall, an army commander in full regalia. His eyes had scanned the crowd with practiced indifference, then locked squarely on me. A flicker of recognition passed over his face, followed by something far more disruptive. Respect. He straightened, clicked his boots together with a sharp snap, raised his right hand in textbook salute, and addressed me clearly. Ma'am, General Claire Sutton. I didn't expect to see you here. That one sentence shattered everything. Not just the polished stillness of the promotion ceremony, not just my sister's carefully prepared speech, but the narrative, their narrative, that I was the disappointment, the dropout, the invisible one in a family of decorated patriots. I didn't move right away, didn't speak, I didn't need to, because in that moment, finally, someone saw me, not the version they reduced me to at family dinners, not the half-truth they whispered about at reunions, but the truth I'd carried in silence for 20 years. My mother dropped her glass. My father froze mid-nod. Erica's hand trembled around the note card she'd been reading from, and I stood, met the commander's salute with one of my own, and said calmly, "It's good to see you too, Colonel." That was the moment it all changed. But if you really want to understand what that moment meant, why that single sentence cracked open a lifetime of silence, then I need to take you back. Back to the beginning. Before the uniform, before the salutes, before the erasure. My name is Claire Sutton. I am a soldier, a strategist, a daughter. And this is how they forgot me. Until they couldn't anymore. I was born into a family where service wasn't a choice. It was a birthright. At our dinner table, honour came before dessert. Rank meant more than feelings, and uniform protocol was spoken as fluently as bedtime prayers. My father, Colonel Raymond Sutton, served 32 years in the United States Air Force. By the time he retired, his spine had a slight curve from years in flight command, and his voice carried the weight of a man who'd given everything to the idea of order. My mother, Judith, had once been a combat medic. Soft-spoken, precise, and impossible to impress. She wore silence like a uniform, only breaking it to quote regulation or give directives disguised as conversation. Then there was Erica, my little sister. From the moment she could walk, Erica was Daddy's pride, a spit-shined prodigy. Honour rolls, JROTC ribbons, perfect push-ups at 16. She followed in every bootprint he laid, and he applauded her for it every step of the way. And then there was me, the oldest daughter, the one who was supposed to lead the way. At 18, I got my appointment to West Point. My father swelled with pride. My mother offered a nod of approval. Even Erica looked at me like I'd finally earned a seat at the table. But by 19, the table turned cold again. I didn't drop out. That's what they said, of course, behind my back, and sometimes to my face when they thought I needed reminding. But the truth is, I was recruited. 1 year in, I was pulled quietly into a program so classified it didn't have a name. No graduation, no ceremony, no diploma. Just a clean disappearance into a shadow war most people don't even believe exists. They were told I left because I couldn't hack it. What they didn't know is that I spent that same year being broken down and rebuilt in ways they couldn't imagine, learning to operate without a name, without backup, without a safety net. I learnt to carry secrets that burned hotter than bullets. But you can't explain that at Thanksgiving, not when your family believes the only path to pride is a parade and a plaque. So when Erica made first lieutenant, there was a banner on the front lawn. When I returned from my first overseas assignment, thin, bone-tired and raw, they forgot to pick me up from the airport. "Sorry," Dad said on the phone. "You didn't give us enough notice, and your sister had her leadership conference." They weren't being cruel, not deliberately. They just didn't see me. They didn't ask questions. Not when I skipped holidays. Not when my mailing address kept changing every 6 months. Not even when I sent my mother flowers for her birthday from a florist in Lisbon, though the card listed Maryland. They simply filled in the blanks with what made sense to them. She left West Point. She works in admin somewhere now. I think she helps veterans with paperwork. Better than nothing, right? I heard it all. From cousins, from neighbours. Once, even from Erica at her promotion party, while I stood 3 feet away. They crafted a version of me that fit better in their photo frames. Quiet, distant, mediocre, and I played along. Because you can't tell your mother you're sitting in a safe house in Aleppo, interrogating a double agent whose handshake still smells like burnt oil. You can't explain to your father that you once wrote an evacuation protocol for an undercover team stuck behind enemy lines, and 3 of those soldiers died anyway because the extraction came 30 seconds too late. You can't tell your baby sister that when she was graduating basic, you were hiding inside the ventilation shaft of a Libyan warehouse, sending coordinates to a drone operator while hostages screamed below you. You just say, "I'm doing okay," and hope they don't hear the screaming in your silence. For nearly 2 decades, I sent postcards with no return address. I made excuses for missed weddings and birthdays. I wrapped myself in invisibility like a second skin, and eventually, they stopped asking. One year I mailed a Christmas card and got nothing back, not even one of those mass family newsletters my mother used to print on red paper with cursive fonts. I asked a cousin once if they ever talked about me. He laughed. Only when someone asks what not to do with your life. That night, I sat alone in a motel outside Munich, medals wrapped in tissue paper inside a shoebox. I stared at the ceiling and whispered something I'd never dared say out loud. I've survived war zones easier than my own family. It wasn't bitterness. It was just the truth. The call came on a Wednesday. My mother's name lit up on the screen like a forgotten warning label. Familiar, sterile, and never a good sign. We hadn't spoken in over a year. I picked up on the 4th ring. "Claire," she said, voice clipped like she was reading a grocery list. "Erica's being promoted next month. Lieutenant Colonel. Ceremonies at Fort Lawrence, families expected to attend." A pause, then, almost as an afterthought, "Please don't wear anything weird." I blinked. "No, how are you? No, we'd love to see you. No, we miss you. Just a dress code." She continued, "You'll be seated with the family, but let Erica speak. Don't make it about you." I bit the inside of my cheek. It wasn't anger that rose, not even sadness. It was something colder, familiar. Like stepping into a room you used to call home and realizing your key no longer works. "I'll be there," I said. Not for her, not for them, but for me. That night, I pulled down the old suitcase from the top shelf of my closet. At the bottom, folded sharp and untouched, lay my original army dress uniform, the one I'd worn only once, to a classified strategy summit in Warsaw where my name didn't even make the attendance list. I ran my fingers across the insignia, still polished, still mine. Next to it I packed a soft grey blouse and clean black slacks, clothes that didn't ask for attention, that didn't scream, "Look at me," but whispered, "Don't forget I'm here." When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognised myself, not because I had changed, but because I had finally stopped apologising for the space I occupied. The next morning, I rented a car and began the 10-hour drive south, through rolling hills, gas station coffee, and military podcasts that felt more like ghosts than information. As I crossed the Fort Lawrence sign, my stomach tightened, not out of fear, but muscle memory. This place made soldiers out of civilians, and orphans out of daughters. When I pulled up to my parents' house, the porch looked exactly the same. Beige siding, a flag hung too perfectly on its pole, the same wooden swing I'd once read letters on during high school summers. No one came out, no one greeted me. The front door was unlocked. Inside, I found my mother in the dining room, arranging place cards for the rehearsal dinner. Without looking up, she said, "Go change your shirt. You'll be sitting next to Erica. Try not to draw attention." No hello, no hug, no acknowledgement of the years between us, just instructions. I stood there for a moment, staring at the back of her head. The same ash-blonde bun, the same clinical posture. My father appeared from the den, gave me a firm pat on the back, like I was a colleague heading to early retirement. "Good," he said. "You made it." That was it. Erica entered last, descending the stairs like she was stepping onto a stage. Her uniform was pristine, ribbons aligned with surgical precision, boots like polished obsidian. She smiled wide, the kind that didn't touch her eyes. "Oh," she said, glancing toward me. "You're here. Everyone, this is my sister Claire. She was in the military for a little while. Now she works in admin, I think." There was polite laughter. Short, shallow, the kind that makes a cut without leaving blood. I didn't correct her. I didn't say, "Actually, I just advised NATO on cyber warfare de-escalation protocol last month." Because they wouldn't hear it anyway, and I was done begging to be heard. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be just family, but even that phrase didn't seem to include me. The table had place cards, fancy ones, printed in cursive font with military titles. Lieutenant Colonel Erica Sutton sat at the head. Next to her was Colonel Raymond Sutton, Ret., and Mrs. Judith Sutton, CM. And me? A handwritten slip of paper. No rank, no prefix, just Claire. I stood for a second, staring at it like maybe someone had made a mistake, but no one looked up, no one noticed. I took my seat without a word. Conversations swirled around me, stories of deployments, promotions, congressional funding for base improvements, laughter that knew its place and who belonged to it. At one point, a family friend leaned toward me and asked with a bright, fake smile, "So Claire, you're with Veterans Affairs now? Admin work, right? That's great. Better than nothing." Better than nothing. I nodded, smiling politely, not wide enough to show teeth, just enough to let it die there. Across the table, Erica was radiant. She moved like someone born to be watched, arms precise, posture flawless. Her fiancé hung on every word she said, and so did most of the room. "I've been practicing my speech," she said, swirling her wine. "I want it to feel personal, like sometimes you don't realize you were wrong until you try to walk away." She looked directly at me. The comment passed like a whisper over broken glass, barely there, but sharp enough to leave a mark. No one called her out. No one asked what she meant, because they all knew. I excused myself and slipped out onto the porch. The night air was thick with crickets and humidity. A brass band rehearsed somewhere down the road, their notes trailing through the air like half-formed ghosts. I sat on the wooden steps and closed my eyes, listening, not to the music, but to the silence that followed me everywhere in this house. Inside, I heard silverware clinking. Someone was talking about Fort Benning. Someone else mentioned Erica's glowing fitness report. No one noticed I was gone. Then came a small tug on my sleeve. A child, maybe 6, maybe 7, looked up at me with big eyes and a plastic tank in her hands. "Did you ever shoot a real gun?" she asked, pure curiosity in her voice. I crouched down, met her gaze. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "I once wrote a plan that helped 30 soldiers make it home alive. That's better than any shot I've ever taken." She blinked, then ran off without saying anything, just like everyone else. The ceremony hall at Fort Lawrence looked more like a cathedral than a military venue. High ceilings, brass fixtures, rows upon rows of perfectly aligned folding chairs arranged with mathematical precision by rank. It was a battlefield of hierarchy, with no bullets, only decorum. I was seated 3 rows from the back. A flimsy label on the chair beside me read, "Family, unassigned." A bureaucratic way of saying, "You're here, but not really." I sat between a junior officer's fiancée and an aunt who smelled like lilac and judgment. Neither looked in my direction. Ahead of us, the stage shimmered with power, polished boots, honor cords, flags lit like stained glass behind plexiglass shields. Erica stood at the podium. Her posture screamed composure. She had the cadence down perfectly, like she'd rehearsed each word in front of a mirror, fine-tuning every blink and breath. She spoke of leadership, sacrifice, perseverance, and then with sharp precision, sometimes it's not about those who leave, it's about those who stay, those who don't walk away when things get hard. Her eyes flicked across the room and landed, however briefly, on me. The message was clear, the knife was clean, and no one saw the blood but me. Applause rippled through the crowd, controlled, predictable. I didn't clap, I didn't move, but someone else did. 2 rows ahead, an officer in a silver beret leaned toward his colleague and whispered, not as quietly as he thought, "Isn't that her, from Dagger Protocol?" The words pierced sharper than any insult Erica could conjure. My spine stiffened. Dagger. That operation wasn't public. Barely declassified, even internally. Only a few key players had access to those records, and even fewer survived to whisper about it. I kept my eyes forward, neutral, unreadable. But inside, something shifted. They didn't forget me. They had just been afraid to speak my name. Until now. After the ceremony, I didn't follow the crowd to the reception hall. I needed air. I stepped outside and leaned against the brick column by the entrance, letting the late afternoon sun burn away the leftover chill from inside. The faint rhythm of boots and chatter echoed behind me, glasses clinking, someone laughing a little too loud, officers trading recycled war stories like baseball cards. I wasn't ready to go back in. That's when I noticed it, a plain, sealed manila envelope tucked into the passenger seat of my rental car. I hadn't left it there. No handwriting, no label. I looked around. Nothing suspicious. No one watching. Still, my pulse quickened. I peeled the flap open and pulled out the contents. Just a single sheet of paper. A scanned email. Time-stamped 2 years ago. No visible sender. Just a subject line. Reckless operation. Civilian casualties. My breath caught. The body of the email was a direct allegation against me, Colleen W., my alias at the time. It referenced a classified mission gone wrong, claiming I'd led an unauthorized strike that resulted in multiple civilian deaths. There was no source cited. But the language, I knew it. Word for word, it mirrored a classified after-action report from an op I'd run in northern Syria. A report that had been sealed, seen only by 3 people, me, my analyst, and a junior officer with secondary clearance, Erica. My chest tightened. She'd seen that report. Sat in on one of the intelligence briefings. We never spoke during it. She was quiet, respectful. Just a note-taker in the corner. I never imagined she'd remember it, let alone use it. I flipped the email over. There at the bottom was a forwarding trail, a breadcrumb path through a now-defunct military relay server. The leak wasn't recent, but the implications were still active. Suddenly the rumours. The subtle shift in how certain NATO teams treated me last year. The unexplained pause on my security clearance renewal. The vague inquiries that fizzled without explanation. It hadn't been a glitch. It had been sabotage. Someone planted doubt, just enough to cast a long shadow, and now that shadow had followed me home. Back inside, the reception buzzed. Erica was holding court near the open bar, smiling too brightly. Every now and then her eyes swept the room, until they found me. For a fraction of a second her smile faltered. She knew. She didn't expect me to find it. And now that I had, she couldn't quite hold the facade together. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I slipped the envelope into my bag and walked past her without breaking eye contact. Let her wonder how much I knew. Let her feel that same chill I'd carried for 20 years. Because something told me this wasn't just about jealousy, it was about erasure, and she had tried desperately to make sure I stayed invisible. I didn't sleep that night. The manila envelope sat on the dresser like a live wire, humming at the edges of my vision. I kept replaying the same question in my head. Why would she do it? Was it resentment, revenge, or something far more human, something even uglier? By morning, I had my answer. I found her outside, just past the reception tent. She was alone, pretending to scroll through her phone, though her screen hadn't changed in 5 minutes. She sensed me before I spoke. I pulled out the envelope, held it up between us like a broken treaty. "You recognize this?" I asked, voice flat. She didn't even pretend. Her eyes flicked to the paper, then back to mine, and she nodded. Yes. Just like that. No hesitation, no attempt to deny. I stared at her. A decade of silence between us, broken with a single syllable. I waited. She filled the space. "Because you weren't supposed to win," she said. Her voice was quiet, measured, almost rehearsed. "You left. You disappeared. And still they never stopped talking about you." She looked away, jaw clenched. "I did everything right. Every step. I stayed. I followed protocol. I carried the flag, wore the ribbons, led the teams." She cut herself off. Took a breath. "But you vanished. And somehow you were still more impressive in absence than I could be in presence." I didn't speak. I let the words land, let them bruise. She kept going. "I thought, if I could just cast doubt, plant something quiet, maybe they'd stop seeing you as this ghost of greatness. Maybe they'd see me for once." There it was, not malice, not vengeance, invisibility. The same feeling that had haunted me for years was now standing in front of me, in her eyes, in her shame. But unlike me, she had chosen to survive it by destroying someone else. I folded the paper and slid it back into my coat pocket. "You realize," I said softly, "what you did could have ended my career. You almost made me an enemy to the very system I protected." Her lip trembled, just slightly, but she didn't cry. "I didn't know it would go that far," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone would actually believe it." That was the worst part. She hadn't even believed in the weight of her own lie. She just wanted to tilt the scales. "You don't get to say sorry," I said. "Not yet." She nodded, and for once said nothing at all. As I walked away, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired, because there's a special kind of heartbreak that comes from realizing the knife in your back has your sister's fingerprints. The bass alarm jolted me out of a dead sleep. Not the soft chime of a morning bugle. This was urgent, sharp, military grade, a siren designed to slam adrenaline into your bloodstream. Seconds later, my phone lit up with an emergency protocol ping. "All high-clearance personnel, report to command coordination immediately. Level 4 breach detected." Still in sweatpants, I dressed in under 3 minutes. Muscle memory doesn't care if you're on active duty or not, it just moves. When I stepped outside, the entire compound was alive. Officers in half-done uniforms, boots dragging, badges clipped on backward. Confusion, panic, controlled urgency. Inside the ops building, the lights were already humming too loud, too white. A grim-faced sergeant handed me a file the moment I walked in. Operation Dagger, Intel Compromised Classified Document Dump, Darknet Forum, Trace. Origin, Claire Walsh, Reserved Command Intel Clearance. I stopped breathing. My name, in bold, at the top of a breach report. The file was thin, but the implications were heavy. An encrypted drop of intel tied to Operation Dagger, one of the most sensitive missions I'd ever led, had just been posted to a Darknet forum less than 3 hours ago. The forensic trace? A login credential associated with my name. A device ID tied to a base-registered terminal I'd used last year. A backdoor path routed through an IP once assigned to me. I sat down, hard. This wasn't sabotage anymore. This was full-blown character assassination. Within 30 minutes, I was sitting across from General Hammond and 2 military intelligence agents in a cold room that smelled like old paint and new distrust. They didn't say, "You're under arrest," but they didn't need to. "Colonel Walsh," one of them said, sliding the breech folder toward me, "can you explain how a dormant credential tied to your clearance was used to upload classified assets?" I stared at the paper, then back at them. "No," I said, "but I intend to find out." I handed over my phone, my encrypted tablet, my comm records for the past 6 months. I gave them everything. Still, it didn't add up. Why now? Why this mission? And how had they gotten access to that specific clearance key, one that had been deactivated and logged as dormant? Unless... My thoughts snapped back to the envelope, the one Erica admitted to sending. It had come from an old relay server. That detail had bothered me at the time. Why use such an outdated system? Why resurrect a dormant path? Suddenly, it clicked. She hadn't known. But the moment she used that link, it triggered an auto-archive retrieval protocol, a digital ghost system designed to preserve legacy mission files. One Erica had stumbled into when trying to hurt me quietly. In trying to plant doubt, she had opened a trapdoor neither of us saw coming, and someone else had been waiting. I didn't wait for permission. The moment I left that interrogation room, I called in a favour. An old contact from Cyber Defence Command who owed me for pulling his career out of a drone scandal in Kandahar. He granted me access to the metadata trail behind the leaked file. What we found chilled me. The file uploaded to the darknet had been attached automatically, not manually, when someone pinged an outdated relay link tied to a now decommissioned backup server. That auto-attachment protocol wasn't part of the original relay design. It had been inserted later, stealthily. I ran a forensic scan on that code insertion. It led to an override authorization dated back to 2017. The name attached? D. Glade. My stomach dropped. Derek Glade. A strategist I hadn't thought about in years. We'd clashed during a joint op in Mosul. He pushed for a full clearance of a civilian-occupied sector under suspicion. I'd blocked it. Backed by intel, by code, by morality, he never forgave me. That same year, he lost a promotion and was quietly reassigned to back-end strategy logistics. A demotion dressed in polite silence. I remembered his face, calm, too calm, the kind of man who doesn't rage. He waits. And now he'd used Erica's poorly calculated email as a fuse, a mine he'd planted years ago, hoping someone would step on it, and someone did. Erica. She hadn't meant to destroy me, but Derek had. He just needed a little family dysfunction to do the heavy lifting. When I traced the final upload path of the leak, it pointed to a motel 10 miles outside the base, paid in cash, booked under a false name. But the server login, the timestamp, the packet signatures, all tied to a device previously assigned to Derek Glade. I handed the data to General Hammond personally. He said nothing. Just took the folder, flipped through 3 pages, then looked up at me with something almost like shame. "You want to be the one to bring him in?" he asked quietly. I nodded once. We hit the decommissioned tech bunker with silent precision. 4 officers, no sirens, no announcements, just footsteps on gravel and a plan sharpened by fury. Inside, Derek was already mid-upload. Lines of code flickering across a rusted terminal, fingers dancing like a man finally pulling the trigger after years of aiming. He didn't flinch when we stormed in. He didn't run. He just looked up at me and smiled. "Took you long enough," he said. I said nothing. Back at base, in the interrogation bay, he confessed without fanfare. "I didn't want to ruin you," he said. "Just make sure you stopped mattering." His voice was calm, his logic terrifying in its simplicity. "You rose too fast. People stopped questioning your wins. I knew your family would fracture eventually. Most decorated lineages do. I just built the scaffold around the crack." He'd used Erica. Manipulated her mistake, weaponized her insecurity, and she never even saw it. He paused, looked at me one last time. "You made the right calls. Every time. But in this system, right doesn't always win. I leaned in. It does when someone keeps standing. The final report on the dagger leak was submitted on a grey Thursday afternoon. Erica's name was in it, not as a criminal, but as the person who unknowingly triggered a cascade. Her admission had been voluntary, her apology handwritten, her reprimand official. She wouldn't be promoted for at least 5 years, but she signed the document without argument. And that said more than any medal could have. A week later, I invited them all to the house. The old family home at the edge of Fort Lawrence, the one with the porch swing, the lemon cleaner smell, the hallway lined with old pictures I'd never been in. This time I arrived first. I set the table. I took the seat at the head, the one my father had always claimed. No one argued. My mother came in with a dish wrapped in foil, her eyes tired. Erica followed behind her, face bare, no makeup, no rank, just her. My father entered last, still stiff, still proud, but something in him had softened too. We didn't eat right away. I didn't open with welcome or thank you for coming. I opened with truth. I didn't leave the military, I said. I was pulled into intelligence, handpicked, no graduation, no ceremony, just shadows. They said nothing, so I kept going. I once spent 3 days in a Syrian holding cell, starving, silent, waiting for a green light to escape through a tunnel I'd mapped in my head. My mother flinched. I ordered a shelling of a supply route in Afghanistan. It saved an Australian recon team. 3 civilians were injured. I lived under investigation for 8 months. My father's hands tightened around his fork. I turned down a medal for a mission in Tripoli because accepting it would have risked a diplomatic fallout. So instead of a podium, I got silence. Still, they said nothing. Until my mother whispered, "We thought those postcards, those Christmas boxes, were your way of saying sorry." I shook my head gently. They were my way of reminding you I still existed. Erica stared at her plate, hands folded. Then I reached under the table and pulled out the folder. The one with the email she sent, the one that started everything. "I'm not showing you this to accuse you," I said. "I'm showing you because it almost ended me. And you need to understand, words don't have to be public to be deadly." She looked up. Her eyes were wet. But she didn't cry. "I know," she said. "I do now." My father leaned back. "I spent so many years thinking the medals on my wall meant I did it right," he murmured. "That I raised you right. But now, I realize I just stopped asking questions." He looked at me. "Is it too late to start?" I didn't smile. I didn't say yes. But I nodded. And that was enough. A month after the investigation closed, I returned to Washington. Life, as it often does, shrank back into routine. I resumed my part-time advisory role at NATO, spent most of my days in a quiet apartment near the Potomac, writing strategy briefs and redacting mission reports no one else dared to decode. But once a month, I returned to Fort Lawrence, not for family, for students. I taught a specialized course for next-gen officers on non-traditional strategy in asymmetric warfare. Small room, chalkboard, no pomp. Erica sat in the front row every time. No rank on her collar, no special introductions, just a notebook and questions. She challenged me, often, debated concepts, offered alternatives. She never once mentioned the past. But one afternoon after class, she waited behind. "Here," she said, handing me a thin blue folder. "Proposal for reforming simulation training, based on your lecture last month." I flipped it open. Smart layout, sharp data, practical design. At the top, I wrote one word in red ink, advance. She nodded. No smile, just relief. We were rebuilding. Not fast, not perfectly, but honestly. At home, things were changing too. My father told a room full of old commanders that his daughter wasn't just somewhere overseas, but now advised NATO on conflict doctrine. My mother sent handwritten notes every now and then, usually simple things. Saw your name in a white paper. I showed the neighbour. Are you eating enough? The porch swing still creaks. I left it. Small, quiet things, but honest. We never took a new family photo, but the one on the mantel, the one I'd once been cropped out of, was replaced. The new version had me in it, still in uniform, still standing tall, no longer invisible. And then one day, near the end of a lecture, a young cadet lingered after the others had left. He looked nervous, maybe 22, barely shaving. "Mum?" he asked, shifting his weight. "In war? What's the hardest part?" I paused, thought about bullets and betrayals, brothers lost and sisters turned cold. Then I said the only answer that ever felt honest. Surviving without turning to stone. He nodded slowly, like he didn't understand yet, but someday he would. That night, as I walked past the empty barracks, the sky burned in streaks of orange and gold. Erica was waiting outside my quarters. She handed me a small birthday cake in a plastic container. It wasn't even my birthday. Written on top, in shaky blue icing, were 3 words: General, Sister, Teacher. I didn't need applause. I didn't need a book written about me. I just needed this. To be seen, to be known, to matter. Not because I shouted louder, but because I never stopped showing up.